In the quiet hum of deep space, where stars seemed like distant pinpricks on an endless black canvas, humanity's most advanced research vessel drifted silently. The Erebus, a sleek ship bristling with telescopes and sensors, was humanity's eye in the cosmos. On board, Dr. Ilara Voss sat hunched over her console, her fingers dancing across glowing screens as she sifted through streams of data pouring in from the edges of known space. She had spent years chasing whispers, faint signals that hinted at civilizations long gone or mysteries yet unsolved. It was late into her shift when something unusual caught her attention. A faint pulse, barely audible amidst the static, flickered on her monitor. At first, she thought it might be interference, but as she isolated the signal, its pattern became clear. It wasn't random noise. It was deliberate. Her heart raced as she replayed it again and again. The message was simple, chillingly so. "Help us. They're coming." Ilara leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. The signal was old, very old. Preliminary analysis suggested it had been traveling through space for over 5 centuries. Whoever sent it was likely long gone, their fate sealed by time itself. But the words, they were haunting. Who were they? And what had happened to the sender? She flagged the discovery immediately, calling Captain Ryland Drake to the observation deck. When he arrived, his tall frame filling the doorway, Ilara didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside her, "we've picked up a distress signal." Drake raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "Distress signals aren't exactly rare out here, Doctor. What makes this one special?" "It's not just any signal," Ilara replied, pointing at the screen. "It's ancient, over 500 years old, and it's not human." That got Drake's full attention. He stepped closer, studying the jagged lines representing the transmission. "You're sure about that?" "Absolutely," Ilara said firmly. "The language isn't anything we've encountered before. Plus, the coordinates trace back to a star system far beyond our usual range, a place no human ship has ever ventured." For a moment, Drake was silent, weighing the implications. Venturing into uncharted territory carried risks. Pirates, rogue eye, even natural phenomena could spell disaster. Yet there was something undeniable about the signal. It tugged at curiosity, at hope, at fear. If this was evidence of intelligent life, or worse, evidence of danger, it couldn't be ignored. "What do you propose?" Drake asked finally. "We go," Ilara said without hesitation. "We investigate. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. Or," she hesitated, glancing at the ominous message once more, "it could be a warning." The captain sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "All right. But if things get dicey, we pull out. No heroics." As preparations began, the crew buzzed with anticipation and unease. Some believed the mission would lead to glory, while others whispered dark predictions. Hours turned into days as the Erebus charted a course toward the mysterious signal's origin. Along the way, strange anomalies started appearing. Lights flickered sporadically throughout the ship. Crew members reported hearing faint voices on communication channels, though no one else was speaking. Shadows moved just out of sight, vanishing when approached. Ilara tried to rationalize these occurrences as equipment malfunctions or stress-induced hallucinations, but deep down, doubt gnawed at her. Was the signal luring them into danger, or was it truly a cry for help? When the destination finally came into view, a desolate planet orbiting the dim red dwarf star, the crew fell silent. The planet looked dead, its surface scared and barren. But as they drew nearer, instruments detected faint energy readings emanating from below the surface. Whatever awaited them down there, it was alive. And it knew they were coming. The Erebus hovered in orbit above the desolate planet, its surface a patchwork of gray dust and jagged ruins. From their vantage point, the crew could see the remnants of an ancient civilization, crumbling towers that reached toward the pale red sky, roads cracked and overgrown with strange metallic vegetation. It was beautiful in its own haunting way, like a forgotten painting left to decay. Captain Ryland Drake stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic display projecting the planet's terrain. "This place looks like it hasn't seen life in centuries," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Dr. Ilara Voss stepped beside him, her gaze fixed on the ruined city below. "Maybe not centuries," she said softly, "but millennia. Possibly." She turned to face the captain, her expression resolute. "We need to go down there. That signal came from somewhere on this planet, and whatever sent it might still be waiting." Drake hesitated, but nodded. "All right. But we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks." He signaled for Lieutenant Mara Quinn, the ship's security officer, to assemble a ground team. Within minutes, a small group of scientists and soldiers gathered in the hangar bay, strapping on oxygen tanks and checking their equipment. The air on the planet was unbreathable, a toxic cocktail of gases that would kill them within seconds if exposed. As the shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere, the eerie silence outside grew heavier. When they touched down near the edge of the ruined city, the team disembarked cautiously, their boots crunching against the brittle ground. The landscape was surreal, almost dreamlike. Strange symbols were etched into every structure, glowing faintly as if powered by some residual energy source. "This is incredible," Ilara whispered, running her gloved hand over one of the carvings. "Whoever built this place had technology far beyond ours. Or maybe they're still here," Mara said grimly, her weapon raised as she scanned the area. Her instincts told her something wasn't right. The emptiness felt too deliberate, too calculated. They moved deeper into the ruins, following the faint energy readings detected earlier. Along the way, they found evidence of catastrophe. Charred skeletons frozen mid-motion, buildings reduced to rubble, and scorch marks covering the ground. It was as though the entire civilization had been wiped out in a single devastating event. Then, among the debris, they stumbled upon fragments of another SOS message carved into a metal wall. Unlike the transmission they'd received, this one was incomplete, but the word sent chills down their spines. "Beware the harbingers. They consume all." "What does that mean?" one of the younger scientists asked nervously, clutching his scanner tightly. "No idea," Mara replied curtly. "But I don't think we want to find out." Ilara crouched beside the inscription, examining it closely. Harbingers. Could this be who or what destroyed this world? Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. At first, they thought it might be an aftershock from some ancient disaster, but then sensors began picking up movement, not natural tectonic shifts, but something alive. "Movement detected," shouted one of the technicians. "Subsurface, heading our way." Panic rippled through the group as they scrambled to form a defensive perimeter. Whatever was coming, it was big and fast. Dust clouds erupted around them as massive forms burrowed closer, shaking the ground violently. Then, without warning, a claw-like appendage burst through the soil mere meters away, scattering shards of rock and metal. "Fall back," Mara barked, firing a warning shot at the emerging creature. Its skin shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the dim light of the red dwarf's sun. Multiple eyes blinked open along its elongated head, fixing on the intruders with predatory intent. "We need to get out of here," Ilara yelled, grabbing her gear and retreating toward the shuttle. But as the team fled, they realized the creature wasn't alone. More shapes writhed beneath the surface, converging on their position. For now, survival took precedence over discovery. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying the shaken crew back to the Erebus, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of this planet's secrets and dangers. Whatever had destroyed this world was still watching, and it knew they were there. Back aboard the Erebus, the crew was shaken but alive. The attack on the planet's surface had left them rattled, their initial excitement replaced by unease. Captain Ryland Drake paced the bridge, his jaw tight as he reviewed footage from the ground team's helmets. What the hell were those things? He muttered under his breath. No one had an answer. Dr. Ilara Voss, however, wasn't ready to give up. Despite the danger, she couldn't ignore what they'd seen. The ruins, the symbols, the cryptic warnings carved into metal walls. There was a story here, buried beneath layers of time and destruction, and she intended to uncover it. "We need to go back," she insisted during a debriefing session in the ship's conference room. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension that hung heavy in the air. "Are you insane?" Lieutenant Mara Quinn snapped, slamming her fist on the table. "Those creatures nearly killed us. We're lucky to have made it out alive." "I agree with Mara," said Commander Elias Kane, the ship's second-in-command. His arms were crossed, his expression skeptical. "We don't know what we're dealing with down there. For all we know, this whole thing could be a trap." Ilara leaned forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "And for all we know, whatever sent that SOS might still be alive. What if they can help us understand what happened to that civilization? Or worse, what if they're still in danger?" Her words struck a chord with some members of the crew, particularly Dr. Theo Patel, the ship's xenobiologist. He nodded slowly, adjusting his glasses. "She has a point. If there are survivors, or even traces of technology, we could learn invaluable information about whoever destroyed that world, maybe even prevent it from happening again." After much debate, Captain Drake reluctantly agreed to send another expedition, but this time they would dig deeper. Using seismic scans taken during their first visit, they identified a series of underground chambers hidden beneath the ruins. These structures emitted faint energy signatures, suggesting they might contain something, or someone, still intact. The next morning, the team descended once more onto the dead planet. Armed with advanced drilling equipment and reinforced suits, they ventured into one of the largest ruins, following the readings to a concealed entrance. The doorway was massive, its frame adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse faintly with light. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew thick with an almost tangible sense of foreboding. The chamber beyond was vast, filled with rows upon rows of towering cryogenic pods. Each pod contained a figure encased in translucent liquid, suspended in stasis. They weren't human. Their bodies were tall and lean, clad in sleek armor etched with glowing patterns. Long limbs ended in claw-like fingers, and their faces were angular, with sharp features and closed eyes that hinted at intelligence far beyond humanity's own. This is incredible," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling with awe. She moved closer to one of the pods, examining its occupant. "They look like warriors. Fully integrated weapons systems. See these conduits running along their arms." Before anyone could respond, a loud hiss echoed through the chamber. One of the pods flickered erratically, its glass surface cracking. Alarmed, the team backed away, weapons raised. Then, without warning, the pod exploded outward, sending shards of glass flying. A figure stumbled out, gasping for air, its glowing eyes snapping open as it scanned the room. For a moment, silence reigned. The being locked gazes with Ilara, tilting its head as though studying her. Then, just as suddenly as it had awakened, it collapsed to its knees, clutching its head as if overwhelmed. Before anyone could react, it let out a low hum, a sound that resonated not just in their ears but in their minds. "Who are you?" The voice wasn't spoken aloud. It reverberated directly within their thoughts. It was calm, measured, yet tinged with urgency. Ilara took a hesitant step forward. "We're explorers. We received your signal. We came to help." The being paused, then nodded slowly, as if processing her words. But before it could say anything else, its body went limp, slumping to the floor. The rest of the team rushed forward, unsure whether to treat it as friend or foe. "What do we do now?" Mar asked, her weapon trained on the unconscious figure. Ilara looked around the chamber, her mind racing. "We take it with us. Whatever it is, it knows something about this place, and maybe about the Harbingers too." As they prepared to transport the mysterious warrior back to the Erebus, none of them realized how profoundly their decision would change everything. The mysterious warrior, now identified by faint markings on its armor as Kel-7, lay unconscious in the Erebus's medical bay. Its presence aboard the ship had sparked heated debates among the crew. Some saw it as a potential ally, others as a looming threat. Dr. Ilara Voss spent hours studying Cal's biology and equipment, her fascination growing with every discovery. The glowing patterns etched into its armor weren't just decorative. They pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, suggesting they were part of some kind of life support system. When Cal finally regained consciousness, the tension on board reached a fever pitch. Lieutenant Mara Quinn stood guard outside the medical bay, her weapon at the ready, while Captain Ryland Drake and Ilara entered cautiously. Cal sat upright on the examination table, its glowing eyes scanning the room before settling on them. It didn't move aggressively, but radiated an aura of calm authority. "You are not my people," Cal's voice echoed in their minds, calm yet tinged with sadness. "Who are you?" Ilara stepped forward, hands raised to show she meant no harm. "We're humans. We found your signal, a distress call, and came to investigate. Can you tell us what happened here?" Cal hesitated, its head tilting slightly as if processing her words. Then, without warning, images flooded the minds of everyone in the room. Visions of towering cities, vibrant skies, and advanced technology. But the scenes shifted abruptly to chaos. Fiery explosions, screams, and shadowy figures descending from the heavens. "The Harbingers. They came for us," Cal explained, its mental voice heavy with grief. "They consume worlds. My people fought back, but we failed. Many chose to enter stasis, hoping someone would awaken us when the time was right." Captain Drake frowned, his arms crossed. "Why didn't you fight back? You're clearly warriors." Cal's gaze hardened. "We tried, but the Harbingers are relentless. They strip planets bare, leaving nothing behind. Even now, they search for survivors to finish what they started." A chill ran through the room. If Cal spoke the truth, humanity wasn't just dealing with ruins and ancient mysteries. They were staring down the barrel of an existential threat. Before anyone could ask more questions, alarms blared throughout the ship. The bridge called urgently over the intercom. "Captain." Multiple contacts detected entering the system. Drake sprinted to the command center, the rest of the team following close behind. On the main view screen, dozens of massive ships materialized out of hyperspace, surrounding the planet. Their design was brutal and utilitarian, spiked hulls bristling with weapons, engines that burned like miniature suns. These were the Harbingers. "They're here," Cal said grimly, standing beside Ilara. "They found us." Panic rippled through the crew. "What do we do?" One officer shouted, his voice cracking under pressure. Drake clenched his fists, trying to think. "Can we outrun them?" Cal shook its head. "No, their sensors will track you, and even if you escape, they'll follow. They never stop." Ilara turned to Cal, desperation in her eyes. "Is there anything we can use against them? Any weakness?" Cal hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There is a weapon, a quantum disruptor. It was designed to disable entire fleets by creating rifts in space-time. But it requires activation codes only my people possess." "Where is this weapon?" Drake demanded. "Buried deep within the planet, hidden where no enemy could find it." The decision was clear. They had to retrieve the disruptor, but getting to it wouldn't be easy, not with the Harbingers closing in. As the fleet began deploying drones and smaller vessels toward the planet's surface, the crew realized time was running out. "We'll have to split up," Drake decided. "Mara, take half the team and hold them off as long as possible. Ilara, you and Cal go after the disruptor." Mara saluted sharply, though her expression betrayed fear. "Understood, sir." As the plan unfolded, Cal turned to Ilara, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. "Trust me," it said simply. If we succeed, we may save not just ourselves, but countless others. With those words echoing in their ears, the team prepared for what might be their final mission. Outside the ship, the Harbingers loomed closer, their intentions unmistakable. Humanity's survival depended on a desperate gamble and an alliance with a being from another age. The air was thick with tension as the team prepared to descend once more onto the planet's surface. Dr. Ilara Voss stood beside Cal 7, her mind racing with questions about the warrior and its people. Despite the gravity of their situation, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. For the first time since arriving at this desolate world, they had a plan and an unlikely ally. Kale moved with precision, checking equipment and ensuring everyone was ready. Though it communicated telepathically, its actions spoke volumes. It was clear that Kale understood the stakes better than anyone else. When Ilara approached, it turned to face her, its glowing eyes softening slightly. "This will not be easy," Kale said, its mental voice steady but tinged with urgency. "The disruptor is guarded by ancient defenses designed to keep intruders out, even those who mean no harm." Ilara nodded, gripping her scanner tightly. "We'll do whatever it takes. Just tell us what to expect." Before Kale could respond, Captain Ryland Drake stepped forward, his expression grim. "Time's running out. Mara's team is already engaging the Harbinger's drones up top. We need to move. Now." With that, the ground team boarded the shuttle and descended into the heart of the ruins. As they landed near the entrance to the underground facility, the landscape felt even eerier than before. The sky above was darkened by swarms of Harbinger drones, their red lights pulsing ominously as they scoured the area. Explosions echoed in the distance, a reminder of the battle raging above. Kale led the way, navigating through narrow tunnels and collapsed passageways with uncanny familiarity. Along the way, it explained fragments of its people's history. They had been a proud civilization, advanced beyond measure, but their hubris had made them vulnerable. When the Harbingers arrived, they offered false promises of peace before unleashing destruction. Kel's people had fought valiantly, but ultimately succumbed to overwhelming force. "These defenses you mentioned," Ilara asked cautiously, "are they automated? Or are there others like you still alive down here?" Kale paused, its gaze dropping briefly. "I do not know. Some may yet survive in stasis, but many chambers were damaged during the attack. If they awaken now, it will be too late for them." As they ventured deeper, the team encountered the first line of defense. Massive automatons resembling insectoid creatures, their metallic bodies gleaming under dim light. Sensors detected movement, and the machines sprang to life, emitting low mechanical growls. "Here we go," Lieutenant Theo Patel muttered, raising his weapon. He fired a test shot, which ricocheted harmlessly off the automaton's armored shell. "Great. Any bright ideas?" Kale stepped forward, extending one claw-like hand. A pulse of energy surged from its fingertips, striking the machine and causing it to freeze mid-motion. "Follow me closely," it instructed. "These guardians recognize my people's signatures. I can disable them, but only temporarily." The group pressed on, weaving through corridors filled with traps and hazards. Laser grids sliced through the air, forcing them to duck and roll. Pressure plates triggered walls of flame, singing their suits. Each step brought new challenges, testing their resolve and teamwork. At one point, a massive door blocked their path, covered in intricate symbols that pulsed faintly. Kale placed its palm against the surface, and the patterns lit up in response. The door groaned open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with holographic projections. Scenes of Kel's people played out before them, moments of triumph, followed by devastation. "This must have been their archive," Ilara whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she watched the final moments of a once great civilization. Kale remained silent, its expression unreadable behind its helmet. But when it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight of sorrow and determination. "They gave everything to stop the Harbingers. Now, so must we. As they pushed onward, explosions shook the ground above, signaling the harbinger's growing aggression. Time was slipping away, and every second counted. Yet amidst the chaos, a fragile bond began to form between humanity and Kel, an alliance forged in desperation, but strengthened by shared purpose. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, knowing failure meant extinction for all. The deeper they descended into the planet's core, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew colder, and faint tremors shook the ground beneath their feet, a constant reminder of the planet's instability. Dr. Ilara Voss tightened her grip on her scanner as she followed Cal 7 through dimly lit tunnels lined with glowing rooms. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from physical exhaustion, but from the weight of what they were about to face. Kale moved with purpose, its armored figure casting long shadows in the flickering light. It occasionally paused to examine symbols etched into the walls, muttering softly to itself, or perhaps communicating telepathically with no one in particular. Ilara couldn't tell. She wanted to ask questions, to learn more about this enigmatic being and its people, but there was no time for curiosity now. Every second counted. "This place is incredible," Theo Patil whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He ran his fingers over a panel covered in intricate carvings. "If we survive this, imagine what we could learn from their technology." "We won't survive if we don't focus," Mara Quinn snapped, her weapon trained ahead as she scanned the darkness for threats. Her sharp tone brought everyone back to reality. They weren't here to marvel at alien artifacts. They were here to save themselves. As they approached the heart of the facility, the team encountered another obstacle. A massive chamber filled with floating platforms suspended over a bottomless abyss. The platforms shifted unpredictably, moving closer or farther apart without warning. On the far side of the chasm stood an enormous door, sealed shut and surrounded by energy fields that pulsed menacingly. "This must be it," Kale said, its mental voice steady despite the peril before them. "The disruptor lies beyond that door, but crossing will test us all." Ilara swallowed hard, staring at the yawning void below. One misstep would mean certain death. She glanced at her teammates, Mara's stoic determination, Theo's nervous fidgeting, and Captain Drake's unwavering resolve, and drew strength from their collective courage. Kale went first, leaping effortlessly between platforms with precision honed by centuries of training. It signaled for the others to follow, guiding them carefully across the treacherous path. When Theo hesitated, frozen by fear, Kale extended a clawed hand, steadying him until he found his footing. Halfway across, the platforms began to destabilize, shaking violently as if triggered by some unseen mechanism. Alarms blared, red lights flashing around the chamber. "Move faster," Drake shouted, urging the group onward. Just as they reached the far side, the final platform collapsed into the abyss, narrowly missing Ilara's boot. She stumbled forward, gasping for breath, while Kale activated the control panel beside the door. The energy fields flickered and died, revealing a passageway leading deeper into the facility. Inside, they discovered the quantum disruptor, a towering machine pulsating with raw power. Its design was both beautiful and terrifying, resembling a crystalline spiderweb connected to a central core. Holographic displays hovered around it, displaying complex equations and warnings written in Cal's language. "The activation codes," Cal murmured, stepping toward the console. It placed its hand on a biometric scanner, which flared to life upon recognizing its genetic signature. Symbols appeared on the screen, shifting rapidly as Cal worked to decipher them. Ilara watched intently, her mind racing. "What happens when we activate it?" she asked. "It creates rifts in space-time," Cal explained. "The Harbinger's fleet will be pulled into these rifts, trapped indefinitely." But it hesitated, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. "Activating the disruptor will destabilize the planet's core. We won't have much time to escape after." Captain Drake nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure we use every second wisely." As Cal continued inputting commands, The facility rumbled violently, dust raining down from above. The Harbingers had breached the surface, their forces closing in. Explosions echoed through the tunnels, growing louder with each passing moment. "We're running out of time," Mara yelled, her voice strained with urgency. Kale didn't respond, its focus absolute. Finally, with a decisive gesture, it pressed the final command. The disruptor hummed to life, its core glowing brighter and brighter. "It's done," Kale declared. "Now run." But as they turned to leave, the facility began to collapse around them. The race for survival was far from over, and none of them knew if they'd make it out alive. The quantum disruptor roared to life, its energy rippling outward in waves that shook the very foundations of the planet. The facility groaned under the strain, walls cracking and debris raining down as the team scrambled toward the exit. Cal 7 led the way, its glowing eyes cutting through the chaos like beacons of hope amidst the destruction. "We need to move faster," Captain Ryland Drake shouted over the deafening noise of collapsing structures. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe. Ilara Voss stumbled but was quickly pulled up by Theo Patel, who had taken it upon himself to keep her steady. Lieutenant Mara Quinn brought up the rear, her weapon drawn as she scanned for any sign of pursuit, though at this point, their greatest enemy was the collapsing facility itself. As they reached the final corridor leading back to the surface, an explosion rocked the tunnel behind them, sealing off their retreat. Panic surged among the group, but Kale remained calm, its telepathic voice cutting through their fear. "There is another route. Follow me." It guided them into a narrow maintenance shaft, barely wide enough for one person to crawl through at a time. The passage sloped upward steeply, forcing them to climb hand over hand while the planet quaked around them. Each tremor sent fresh showers of dirt and rock tumbling down, threatening to bury them alive. Meanwhile, above ground, the battle raged on. Lieutenant Mara's earlier team had managed to hold off the Harbinger's drones temporarily, but their forces were dwindling. Explosions lit up the darkened sky as ships clashed overhead. One human vessel exploded in a fiery burst, sending shards of metal raining down onto the desolate landscape. Back aboard the Erebus, internal tensions boiled over. A faction within the crew, led by Lieutenant Mara's second-in-command, Lieutenant Jace Renner, began questioning whether continuing the fight was worth the risk. "We're throwing our lives away for nothing," he argued during a heated meeting in the mess hall. "That thing, Cal, isn't even human. How do we know it won't betray us?" His words struck a nerve with some members of the crew, particularly those who had lost friends in the fighting. When Mara returned to the ship after being injured in combat, she found herself facing a mutiny. Jace stood at the center of the dissidents, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "If we surrender now, maybe the Harbingers will spare us." Mara stared at him, disbelief etched across her features. "You think they'll show mercy? Look at what they've done to this planet. To Cal's people, they don't negotiate, they destroy." But Jace wasn't listening. He rallied his followers and commandeered several smaller ships, breaking away from the fleet. Ignoring Captain Drake's orders to stand down, he transmitted a message to the Harbinger's flagship, offering surrender in exchange for safe passage. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, the Harbingers responded, not with words, but with action. Their massive warships opened fire, obliterating Jace vessels in seconds. The betrayal ended not with negotiation, but with annihilation. Aboard the Erebus, the remaining loyalists watched in horror as their former comrades were wiped out. The brutality of the Harbinger's response silenced all talk of surrender. Instead, resolve hardened among the survivors. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for humanity's future. Below the surface, Kale and the ground team finally emerged into the open air, gasping for breath as they surveyed the devastation around them. The Harbinger's bombardment had intensified, turning the ruins into a hellscape of fire and ash. But despite the odds, hope flickered in their hearts. The disruptor was active, and the rifts were spreading. They're retreating, Theo exclaimed, pointing skyward as several Harbinger ships vanished into swirling vortexes. For the first time since arriving on this cursed world, victory seemed possible. But Kale turned to the group, its expression grim. This planet cannot withstand the Disruptor's power much longer. We must leave. Now. As they sprinted toward the extraction pods, the ground cracked beneath their feet, molten lava bubbling to the surface. Time was running out, for the planet, and for everyone still trapped on it. The extraction pods were their only lifeline, but reaching them felt like an impossible race against time. The ground beneath their feet trembled violently as molten lava surged upward, consuming everything in its path. Chunks of rock tumbled from above, forcing the team to dodge and weave through the chaos. Kel 7 moved with unmatched speed, clearing debris and guiding the others towards safety while keeping a watchful eye on the horizon. The rifts are spreading, Theo Patel shouted, pointing at the sky. Above them, massive cracks tore through space itself, swallowing Harbinger ships whole. Dozens of vessels disappeared into the swirling voids, their once mighty armada reduced to scattered remnants. Yet even as the enemy fleet faltered, the Disruptor's activation was taking a devastating toll on the planet below. Ilara Voss stumbled, her legs burning with exhaustion, but Kale caught her before she fell. "Keep moving," it urged, its mental voice calm yet urgent. She nodded, pushing herself forward despite the pain. Every step brought fresh challenges: collapsing tunnels, rivers of magma, and collapsing ruins, but the team pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. Captain Ryland Drake led the charge, his focus unshakable. "We're almost there," he yelled over the cacophony of destruction. Ahead, they could see the extraction pods nestled in a shallow crater, their sleek forms gleaming under the red dwarf sun. But the pods weren't safe yet. The surrounding area was rapidly being consumed by the planet's collapse. As they reached the crater, Lieutenant Mara Quinn scanned the skies nervously. Harbinger reinforcements could arrive any second. "We need to launch now." Kale stepped forward, placing one hand on the nearest pod's control panel. It hesitated for a moment, then turned back to face the group. "I cannot leave." "What do you mean?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling. "You saved us. You can't stay here." "The Disruptor requires constant stabilization," Kale explained, its glowing eyes softening slightly. "If I abandon it, the process may fail, allowing the Harbingers to escape. My people entrusted me with this duty. I must fulfill it." "No," Ilara protested, stepping closer. "There has to be another way. You don't have to die here." Kale tilted its head, studying her intently. "Death is irrelevant when weighed against survival. For your kind and mine. Go, live. Carry the memory of what happened here so that others may learn." Before anyone could argue further, Kale activated the pods remotely, sealing each crew member inside their respective vessel. The doors locked shut automatically, leaving no room for hesitation. Through the reinforced glass, Ilara pounded on the interior, shouting Kal's name, but the warrior merely raised a clawed hand in farewell. Outside, the ground split apart, revealing a chasm of molten fire. Kale stood tall amidst the inferno, its armor reflecting the hellish glow as it returned to the Disruptor's core. With precise movements, it interfaced directly with the machine, ensuring its continued operation even as the facility crumbled around it. Inside the pods, Captain Drake initiated launch sequences, his jaw clenched tightly. "Hold on," he warned, gripping the controls. One by one, the extraction pods shot into the air, narrowly avoiding falling debris as they ascended toward orbit. Below, the planet began to break apart, massive chunks breaking free and tumbling into space. Ilara watched through tear-filled eyes as the surface disintegrated, taking Kel and its sacrifice with it. Though grief threatened to overwhelm her, she forced herself to focus on survival. Humanity owed Kel more than despair. It owed remembrance and action. As the pods docked with the Erebus, The remaining crew scrambled to prepare for departure. Explosions rocked the ship as stray Harbinger drones launched desperate attacks, but the Loyalists fought back fiercely. On the bridge, Captain Drake barked orders, steering the battered vessel clear of the planet's gravitational pull just as the final cataclysm struck. With a blinding flash, the planet imploded, consumed by the disruptor's power. The Harbinger's remaining forces were dragged into the rifts, vanishing forever. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the hum of the Erebus engines as it limped toward safety. Though battered and bruised, humanity had survived. But Kel's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone's hearts, a reminder that hope often comes at a cost. The Erebus drifted through the void, its hull battered and scarred from the battle that had nearly claimed them all. Inside, the crew moved in silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. Though they had escaped the collapsing planet and defeated the Harbingers, victory felt hollow without Cal-7. Its sacrifice hung heavy over them, a constant reminder of the cost of survival. Dr. Ilara Voss sat alone in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small fragment of alien metal salvaged from the ruins, a piece of Cal's armor that had been left behind during their escape. It was cold to the touch, but it carried an undeniable weight, both literal and symbolic. She replayed Cal's final moments in her mind. The way it had stood tall amidst the chaos, ensuring the disruptor completed its purpose even as the planet crumbled around it. They were remarkable, Captain Ryland Drake said softly, stepping into the room. He leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed. I didn't trust them at first. Hell, I wasn't sure if we should have trusted them at all. But now, his voice trailed off, filled with regret. Ilara nodded slowly. Cal gave everything so we could live. Not just for us, for everyone who might have faced the Harbingers next. They knew what was coming, and they chose to stay anyway. Drake sighed, rubbing his temples. We owe them more than words or memories. We need to honor their sacrifice by making sure this never happens again. On the bridge, Lieutenant Mara Quinn oversaw repairs alongside Commander Elias Kane. The damage to the Erebus was extensive. Burnt-out circuits, cracked windows, and entire sections of the ship rendered uninhabitable, but morale among the survivors was surprisingly high. The mutiny led by Jace Renner had ended in tragedy, but it had also united those who remained under a shared sense of purpose. No one wanted to see another world destroyed like the one they'd just left behind. We're lucky to be alive, Theo Patel muttered as he worked on rewiring a damaged console. His fingers moved deftly, despite his exhaustion, sparks occasionally flying from faulty connections. But what about the others? The ones still trapped in stasis back there? Mara glanced up briefly, her expression grim. If any survived the collapse, they're gone now. That planet is dust. All we can do is remember what happened and make sure someone listens when we tell the story. As the hours passed, the crew began piecing together plans for the future. Ilara proposed creating a coalition of worlds dedicated to defending against interstellar threats like the Harbingers. Using data recovered from the ruins, they could develop new technologies and strategies to prevent such devastation from happening again. Drake agreed, though he warned that humanity would need allies willing to put aside old rivalries and fears. Meanwhile, sensors picked up faint readings trailing behind them, residual energy signatures from the quantum disruptor. The rifts it had created were beginning to stabilize, sealing shut one by one. But as the last rift closed, something unexpected appeared on the scanners. A single, massive object emerging from subspace. What the hell is that? Drake demanded, rushing to the main view screen. The object was unlike anything they'd seen before, a colossal sphere covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly, resembling the carvings found on the ruins. It's beautiful, Ilara whispered, her eyes wide with awe. Could it be part of Cal's people's technology? Something left behind. Before anyone could speculate further, the sphere emitted a low hum, resonating through the ship. Then, a familiar voice echoed in their minds, not Cal's, but similar. You have done well. The message sent chills down their spines. Was this some remnant of Cal's civilization, or something else entirely? For now, answers eluded them. But one thing was certain. Humanity's journey into the stars had only just begun, and they were no longer alone. The mysterious sphere hovered silently in the void, its glowing patterns shifting like a living entity. The crew of the Erebus stared at it in stunned silence, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten as they grappled with the implications of what, or who, they were witnessing. Captain Ryland Drake stood frozen on the bridge, his hand hovering over the ship's communication controls. He hesitated to respond, unsure if this new presence was friend or foe. "Do we try to communicate?" Dr. Ilara Voss asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched the fragment of Cal's armor tightly, as if drawing strength from it. Drake nodded slowly. "We came all this way looking for answers. Let's see what this thing wants." With a deep breath, he activated the ship's external speakers. "This is Captain Ryland Drake of the human vessel Erebus. We mean no harm. Can you understand us?" For a moment, there was no response. Then the hum grew louder, resonating through every corner of the ship. Once again, the telepathic voice echoed in their minds, calm, ancient, and wise. "You are not alone." Ilara gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. The words were simple, yet they carried profound meaning. Humanity had spent centuries gazing at the stars, wondering if they were truly alone in the universe. Now here was proof that other civilizations existed, and that some had endured even after unimaginable loss. "What do you want from us?" Drake asked, his tone firm but respectful. The sphere pulsed gently, its light brightening for a brief moment. "To guide you, to warn you. The harbingers are relentless, but they are not invincible. Learn from those who came before. Stand united against the darkness." As the message faded, the sphere began to retreat, drifting back into the depths of space. Its glow dimmed until it vanished entirely, leaving the crew staring at empty stars once more. "Well," Lieutenant Mara Quinn said dryly, breaking the silence, "that was something." Despite her sarcasm, there was a spark of hope in her voice, a shared understanding among the survivors that they had been given a second chance. Whatever the sphere was, its message was clear. Humanity had a role to play in the greater cosmic struggle, and it couldn't face it alone. Back aboard the ship, discussions turned toward the future. Using data salvaged from the ruins and insights gained from their encounter with Cal, Ilara proposed forming an interstellar alliance, a coalition of worlds dedicated to defending against threats like the Harbingers. Her vision wasn't just about survival. It was about unity, progress, and ensuring that tragedies like the one they'd witnessed would never happen again. Captain Drake supported her proposal wholeheartedly. "Cal sacrificed everything so we could live. It's our responsibility to honor that sacrifice, not just by surviving, but by thriving, by protecting others who might not be able to protect themselves." Commander Elias Kane added, "We'll need allies, other species, colonies, anyone willing to join us. If the Harbingers return, and they will, we can't face them divided." The journey home was long and arduous, but the crew found solace in their shared mission. They documented everything: the ruins, the battle, Cal's bravery, and prepared to share their story with Earth and beyond. For the first time in years, humanity felt a renewed sense of purpose. Fear no longer paralyzed them. Instead, it fueled their determination to build a better future. As the Erebus approached Earth's solar system, Captain Drake stood on the observation deck, gazing at the distant blue planet. He thought about Cal, the sacrifices made, and the challenges ahead. But most of all, he thought about hope, a fragile but powerful force capable of uniting even the most disparate souls. "We've been given a gift," he murmured to himself. "Now it's up to us to use it wisely." And with that, the battered but resolute ship descended toward Earth, carrying not only stories of loss and survival, but also the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The The stars still held countless secrets, dangers, and wonders, but humanity was ready to face them together.